Hello viewers, I'm going to talk about baby bend clocks and mainsprings, and then I'll do a separate video on larger Westclox models. I'm making this video to answer a question for a viewer, but I'm also making this video sort of broad enough that it can be used standalone for others. Mainspring interchangeability on style 2 through 7 2-key movements. This is a style 7 2-key movement. The alarm bridge is missing in this example. I didn't want to take apart one of my complete clocks to do this demonstration on. I'm using my collection of movements here. This is a style 2 movement. The late style ones are similar. The earlier style ones, and I realize there's earlier movements than this, but this is generalized. This is the more common movement that you're going to find. That's earlier style 1, going back to about 1921-ish. The alarm bridge on this movement will not mount in place of the alarm bridges on these movements. And I say that with a grain of salt. It might. I've never tried. It's different enough that I haven't tried. But this bridge will quite happily mount on this movement. But there's a catch. Take a look at this movement and tell me what's different about it. What clock do you suppose this movement came out of? This is a style 3 baby bend. Probably the least common of the baby bends. And this is the movement out of one. What is the giveaway? The idler gears in the train between the winding key and the barrel, and the use of an on-off staff for the alarm. If you'll recall, the style 2s and late style 1s do not have that. They use the slide switches mounted on the case. So there is no hole here. Other than that, the bridges are identical. Then we move on to the style 4. And you see we've got the bridges are the same. The only difference being the absence of the reduction gearing, but you can see the little finger there where the winding key would mount. Otherwise, it's identical. And then going on and on through the years, there's a style 6 with its original bridges still. Now there's a change in materials. No longer do we have nickel-plated brass like we have here. Now it's blued steel and plain brass. And yes, I've heard these described as being stainless steel. They're not. They're nickel-plated brass. Westclox didn't use any stainless steel in anything. It'll be either aluminum or nickel-plated brass, just to clarify that. If there is any steel, it'll be blued, like you see there. This is a steel click and a steel barrel bridge, and everything is blued. Here we've got brass clicks and steel bridges, and once again the steel parts are blued. Westclox was very good about the way they finished parts, that generally steel parts are blued, but there are exceptions, like of course this pivot on that idler gear is steel and it's not blued. These rivets are steel and they are not blued. The rivet that is the pivot for the clicks are steel and they are not blued. Same thing here. They might be nickel finished steel, or they might just be plain steel. Likely they are nickel plated steel. I've never bothered to look. But just keep that in mind when we're talking about the plates and barrels. Steel barrels are blued. Brass barrels and plates are either raw brass or nickel plated. Anyway, that's a little diversion there in the finishes. I'm sorry, making the video longer. Let's get back down to the meat and potatoes here. Okay. I want to take the spring as an exercise out of this movement and mount in this movement. And to further emphasize interchangeability, I even want to take the great wheel out of this movement and mount in this movement. There's no balance wheel, but the verge is still there, so I can wind this up and flick this back and forth and see the gears move. Oh yeah, look, even the steel gearing is blued. So, let's begin. Get this guy to stay in a position there where I can work and you be in frame. This video is probably going to end up being longer than I want. Okay. First of all, let's check to make sure that the springs are let down. And I can do that by using my thumb on the gear there, and there's quite a bit of play. There's quite a bit of play there. So I know that the gears are, the springs are let down, the gears are all loose. There's a lot of freedom there. They're not tight. So we'll go ahead and take this apart. You notice I did both the time and the alarm side because the alarm verge is held the time plate. And I've magnetized this screwdriver to make moving the screws easier. See? They stay in place. It's going to help out a lot when I go to reassemble the movement. I suggest you be very careful with your magnetized screwdrivers. Don't get them near the hair springs. Okay. There's the great wheel, the barrel, and the barrel bridge all as one assembly. There's the alarm verge with the hammer and the tail for the repeat. Okay, set that aside. Start by removing the great wheel and spring from the barrel. Gently rotate the great wheel back and forth to unhook it from the spring. There's a hook at the center. I want to do that gently so as not to deform the inner coil of the spring, because that will make it more difficult to get the hook to grab back onto the spring during reassembly. Next, use either a screwdriver or a pair of pliers and lift up the center coils of the spring like so. Get them out of there, and then you can just simply unwind the coils from the barrel. It's not hard to do. The springs are pretty small. Even if they get out from your control, they're not really going to do a whole lot. When you get to here, you're going to have the spring like this. You'll need to unhook it. Do that like that by pulling the spring that way so it comes out from the hook. Now we have the spring removed from the barrel. Ideally, at this point, what you'd want to do is clean the spring. If you see any rust, go over it with steel wool. Polish the spring up as much as you can. Get the spring nice and clean. You want it to smoothly slide. The coils should against each other. Re-lubricate the spring upon reassembly back into the movement. Some people like to use a heavier non-detergent oil. Some people like using Slick 50. I've not been able to find Slick 50 in my area. I like to use Hypoid lubricant, and I'll do another video and I'll talk about spring lubricants. There are a lot of options. Didn't check anything on this one because, look, there is no spring in there. I want to check the hook and make sure that it's open just enough. Oops, not got that in. I'm going to check the hook and make sure it's open enough that I won't have any difficulty getting the new spring in. So I'm taking the tip of this screwdriver, which is very fine, and just sort of gently pressing down on it and working it between the hook and the barrel. It opened it up just a little bit, but it's very imperceptible how much it moved. If you move it in any real perceptible amount, you'll probably break the hook off. So just gently, like I said, watch that motion again. Are you in focus? Just taking the screwdriver there, held like this, pushing down. The screwdriver is, the blade is tapered, so just pushing down gently at the tip, like that. You can see the blade there. Just pressing down on it gently, moving the blade down a little bit to work the hook open a little. It's going to make inserting the spring that much easier. And then take the spring, the end of the spring, make sure the end is formed the way you want it, sort of straight. Press it into the side of the barrel, get it to match the contour of the barrel. Get about a half a turn started in there. And then watch on this little window here so you can see when you get the spring hooked on the barrel hook. You will be able to see the spring, like I can see right here, through the side of the opening there where the hook is punched out of the side of the barrel. And if you have difficulty, just make sure you have it hooked on there before you proceed. Then start winding the spring in. The hardest part is getting the spring past the hook on that first full coil, but after that it winds in fairly easy. Just keep winding, don't stop. You'll keep winding and you'll reach a point where the center coils just drop into place. And if you look, you can see the spring is caught on the hook, which is what you want. So it's ready to go into the movement now. Have to do this step first. And if the hook doesn't catch, like it's not, take your pliers and reform the inner coils a little tighter so that it'll grip. Okay, it's catching now. Alright, it's ready to go back in now. And we'd have a complete movement here, let's say. Just like that. And the difference in the screws. These screws are shouldered. You see the shoulders there. Whereas the screws in the older movements, like this one here, are basically a stove bolt screw. So make sure that the correct screw is used for the movement you are assembling. Okay. Something's not quite lined up right there. Let's loosen that back up a little bit. There we go. Not a lot of talking going on right here, because we're just putting screws back in. Like that. And you'll know everything fits when you have, you see I have the right amount of end shake there. There's just some end shake. It's wound all the way up. You can manually manipulate the verge now. You can see the gears turning. You can see the escapement turning there. So there you go. Don't be afraid to pick up clocks that have got a spring broken here or there. As long as there's one good spring in there, you can use it to make another clock work. Important thing to look at is cosmetics. Cosmetics, cosmetics, cosmetics. On the case, on the interior parts, everywhere. Just keep looking for parts. Build up a stock. Everything interchanges. The Westclox knew what they were doing for a long time before they stopped making these entirely and totally cheaped out on us. Good luck. Happy hunting.